Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to explore how the catastrophic end of a thousand-year empire directly ignited the Western Renaissance. It's an absolutely incredible story, one of human despair, massive shifts in technology, and a profound transfer of knowledge that, honestly, literally changed the course of human history. Let's get right into it. So picture this profoundly human moment back in 1453. You have Emperor Constantine XI, and he is desperately waiting for reinforcements. A Venetian scout ship had just managed to slip through the heavy Ottoman blockade to search for this promised rescue fleet. But they came back with absolutely chilling news. There was no fleet. No one was coming. In that exact moment, Constantine realized his Italian allies had completely abandoned him. He was entirely alone. Faced with just utter despair, historical accounts actually tell us that Constantine broke down and wept. He realized that all of Christendom had essentially deserted him. But here's the thing, he didn't surrender. Actually, scratch that, he did the exact opposite. He completely steeled his nerve. He committed his doomed city to God and the Theotokos. And then, in a true display of leadership right in the face of annihilation, he personally intervened to stop violence from breaking out between his own panicked Venetian and Genoese defenders. He had to get them focused on the impossible battle ahead. During those final hours, Constantine took a really poignant series of last steps. First up, he commanded that the most venerable icon of the Mother of God be paraded right through the streets, which brought the Orthodox and Catholic defenders together in unified prayer. Next, the emperor took his final rites in the great church, the Hagia Sophia. The priest administering communion there couldn't have possibly known this would be the very last time a Roman emperor would ever step inside. Just incredible. And finally, he rode out into the night to his palace at Blackcharnai, inspected his soldiers at the wall, and prepared to face his end. Moving on to Section 2, Gunpowder and Empire, the clash of ancient walls and modern artillery. But to really understand why 1,000 years of continuous Roman history finally shattered, we have to look at the staggering mismatch in both military technology and just sheer manpower. On one side of the ledger, you've got a 49-year-old emperor with a meager 7,000 men standing in defense, and that included just 2,000 Genoese and Venetian volunteers. But on the other side, you have a 21-year-old sultan commanding a massive Ottoman army of roughly 80,000 attackers. The numbers alone are absolutely staggering. This clash between the two forces was really the ultimate triumph of early modern artillery over ancient stone. The Byzantine defense relied entirely on the aging stone of the Theodosian walls. Now, these walls had been historically impenetrable for centuries. They were legendary. But the Ottoman offense, they literally brought the future. We're talking massive gunpowder cannons explicitly designed by a Hungarian engineer named Orban. These weapons were so incredibly destructive, they didn't just break the walls, they changed the very nature of warfare forever. So this grueling 53-day siege kicks off in April 1453 with a relentless, pounding cannon bombardment. Then, right in the middle of the siege, the Sultan displayed some absolute tactical genius. In what was honestly a staggering feat of engineering, he ordered his men to drag their ships entirely overland on greased logs. Why? To completely bypass the protective chain across the Golden Horn, which completely isolated the city. Finally, on May 29th, a coordinated land and sea assault breached the walls. Constantine died fighting right alongside his men, and his body was lost to history. All right, Section 3, a city transformed, the birth of a new Ottoman heart. With the city fallen, the immediate geopolitical and cultural shifts brought by Mehmed were lightning fast, and I mean absolute. He didn't just conquer the city, he rapidly transformed it into the administrative jewel of the Islamic world. And at the exact same time, he claimed the legacy of Rome for himself, literally declaring himself Caesar of the Romans. He renamed the city Constantinople and immediately converted the great Hagia Sophia into a mosque. Yet what's really remarkable here is that he also openly invited Jews, Christians, and Muslims back to repopulate and revive the cultural and economic life of his brand new capital. Which brings us to Section 4. The Greek Exodus, the flight of scholars from east to west. While the city was busy changing hands, a profound ripple effect began. Greek scholars started fleeing the advancing Ottoman rule and poured straight into Western Europe. Now, the absolutely crucial point to remember here is that these refugees didn't just arrive empty-handed. Not at all. They migrated to 44 documented Western European cities, working as translators, physicians, and astronomers. And more importantly, they brought with them classical scientific and philosophical knowledge that had been virtually lost to the Latin West since late antiquity. It was a complete game changer. When you look at the raw data from the printing presses of that era, it's wild. You can literally trace an explosion of printed ancient texts in the 16th century, at certain points making up nearly 10% of total European printing output. And this massive spike, it happened precisely in the specific cities where those Greek migrants had settled. It wasn't just a coincidence, it was a massive, concentrated influx of thought and academia spreading like wildfire. Let's head into Section 5, Sparking the Renaissance, how ancient knowledge fueled modern invention. So, what was the actual measurable impact of this huge knowledge transfer? Well, by drastically augmenting the available knowledge stock in fields like astronomy, math, and medicine, these Greek migrants gave Europe exactly what it needed at exactly the right time. They rapidly increased what economists like to call upper tail human capital. That's basically just a fancy way of saying they created a huge concentration of highly skilled innovators in a single area. By injecting centuries of preserved wisdom into their new host cities, they quite literally drove a completely new wave of global scientific discovery. Which brings us to an incredible figure, 1.38%. Now, I know that might sound small, but trust me, in historical economics, it is absolutely massive. This specific number represents the significantly larger yearly growth rate experienced by those 44 destination cities between 1500 and 1600, at least when compared to other European cities. It perfectly proves the raw economic power of this knowledge. The cities that absorbed these scholars and their ancient texts measurably grew and prospered far, far faster than the rest of Europe. It really is a grand historical irony when you think about it. The terrifying, tragic collapse of the East is exactly what forced Christian Europe to adapt. Because the Ottomans suddenly controlled the major Eastern trade routes, nations like Spain and Portugal were forced to sail west, which directly kicked off the Age of Exploration. And simultaneously, the flight of all those Greek scholars provided the exact academic fuel needed for the Italian Renaissance. Europe was literally forced to look back to ancient science just to build the modern era. So this all leaves us with a fascinating final thought for this explainer. If Emperor Constantine XI hadn't wept alone on those doomed walls back in 1453, realizing his allies were never, ever coming to save his ancient empire from the cannons of tomorrow, would the modern world as we know it even be here today? It's an absolutely incredible piece of history to wrap your head around. Thank you so much for exploring it with me.